the show today, we have guest Dr. Genevieve Erker Caffrey. Dr. Genevieve Erker Caffrey is a former elementary and middle school teacher and the founder of Schema Curriculum and Consulting, a K-12 social studies professional learning organization. Over 12 years in classrooms across St. Louis, Chicago, and Guadalajara, Mexico, she became increasingly concerned by the marginalization of social studies and the lack of coherent guidance for teaching complex, high-emotion topics. Her doctoral research at the University of Missouri-Columbia culminated in the creation of the P.O.W.E.R framework, a curriculum design model that helps educators build inquiry, discourse, and civic agency into their everyday practice. Get ready for a great episode.
I'm educational justice coach Lindsay Lyons, and here on the Time for Teachership podcast, we learn how to inspire educational innovation for racial and gender justice, design curricula grounded in student voice, and build capacity for shared leadership. I'm a former teacher leader turned instructional coach. I'm striving to live a life full of learning, running, baking, traveling, and parenting because we can be rockstar educators and be full human beings. If you're a principal, assistant superintendent, curriculum director, instructional coach, or teacher who enjoys nerding out about co-created curriculum with students, I made this show for you. Here we go.
Aw.
Okay, so do you want to tell us about the W?
Yes, I do. Okay, so the W stands for wisdom and wit. And it's hard to say that I have any favorites, but it might be my favorite because it is a place where it's not just about joy. It certainly does generate a lot of joy and we celebrate a lot of joy, but it's about affirming diverse ways of knowing. It's about bringing, it's about centering the experiential wisdom and wit from communities represented in the curriculum and the students themselves. So it's treating typically treating marginalized music, art, stories, humor, dance, language, creativity as historically grounded knowledge. And that is a lot of fun. And so it's exploring how cultural expression sparks joy, but also can expose injustice. And that is fun to just like, so it's a lot of like comparing and contrasting song lyric or studying song lyrics. Um, like this land is your land, this land is mine, like looking at what you got, like the original songs and how they evolved over time and how there's a lot of wit. There's a lot of what's the word? Satire in a lot of songs and art, and kids get a kick out of it. So yeah, it's and then like in terms of activities, so it's for little guys, it's using storytelling, drawing, song, and movement to explore social studies ideas, creating class books from family stories and community memories, kind of teaching them, like sharing oral stories, oral traditions, and validating that as history, as historically, like a history of their families, and um, comparing stories from different cultures and discussing like what they teach, making art, showing what students know about identity and place and belong. So, using multiple languages, using translanguaging, and um, so yeah, and then like older students might compare textbooks. That's kind of fun with and looking at the different ways that um, poetry and music and visual art are used to tell truth and express joy. Students might um, just create like use children's literature. I mean, there's so much children's literature out there that tells um, these stories about the wisdom and wit. I mean, like there's the books about how enslaved people used to create their cornrows in their hair would create maps for to lead to the Underground Railroad. That's wisdom, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant and witty. Um, a lot of Goldie Muhammad's work comes to life through this dimension. Her focus on cultivating genius, unearthing joy. Um, but again, it can certainly dig up oppression again. That is part of it. But yeah, it's a really fun one where we get into Harlem Renaissance and disability arts and indigenous literacy resurgence as like, like what is the literacy of nature, the literacy of nature. And by the way, like I when I think of identity, nature, and environment, and those are all, I consider that a historically marginalized identity group in and of itself. So um, that is, I think, important. But yeah, so I could talk for a long time about wisdom and wit. I have a lot of children's books that I think are really fun. I mean, I have children's books that fit into all of these things, but these are just really fun.
These are incredible. And I just want to name for the audience that we will link to the page that has a really cool images of children's books and how they map onto this framework. So thank you for putting that
Yeah.
together.
Yes, yes. There's something about children's books that's the it's like speaking the language for teachers to, it's like they see the covers of certain familiar children's books and they're like, oh, okay, now I know what you're talking about. Yeah, so I do have visuals of those picture books and how they might fit across each of these dimensions.
Do you want to tell us about E?
I would love to. Yes. Okay. So E stands for entanglements and empowerment. So I think entanglements is all about leaning into complexity and nuance, no matter what the topic is, because I think that is the something that we have a tendency to do, especially for little kids. We want to make it clear, and um, we want we want them to understand something. We want to put it on assessment, and we want to know if they learn it or not. But we really do them a disfavor when we pretend like anything about social life is simple. And so, anything about history, anything about contemporary issues, we need to lean into the complexity. Even the stories about Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks, some of those stories that have been so deeply simplified, um, we need to make sure that, like, so Dr. LeGarrette King has the Black Historical Consciousness Framework, and one of his dimensions, one of his principles is historical contention, which meaning historical contention within the Black community, because so often the Black community gets represented as a monolith that everybody, believed the same thing about how we get our rights, and like, for example, the Brown versus Board of Education, there are really great children's books and stories about how there was contention around that Brown that schools should not be integrated. And there's always, I mean, I've seen kindergarten teachers just read a book about Martin Luther King and then read a book about Malcolm X and talk about the entanglements of the civil rights movement within the Black community. So the entanglements don't always have to be, across identity groups. They always have been within as well. So, yeah, so it's about prompting student-led inquiry into the connections, tensions, contradictions, and unfinished change. We have to prompt them with these stories that are like, oh, wait, what? Not everybody was on the same page about this, but um, and not just like I mean, because really, and the reason empowerment is along with it is because, we want to, it's important to celebrate the the progress that we have made. It is a big part of, it's the number one component of organizing, of activism, is celebrating the wins and celebrating the progress. Um, and but at the same time, we don't want to fall into the trap of believing that progress is inevitable and that we're just going to arrive to this place all by itself. We have to recognize the entanglements within the progress. So the empowerment is about the progress, is about the ways in which people have formed um, coalitions and they have collaboratively found agency, and and actually made progress, actually gained rights. And but the entanglements are like a check on that progress that making sure that we understand that, it's never as simple as it sounds and or it has been made to seem through certain narratives and stories. Um, yeah, so it's ensuring that, empowerment is not just isolated civil acts, but um, teaching students about the capacity to act ethically within and against entangled conditions too. So there's a lot. I think it's really about complexity of progress, the complexity of progress, the complexity, but really the complexity of everything. And yes, there's a lot of, so in terms of like how to do that, I guess I did mention a few examples of, comparing and contrasting two different stories. Um, but you can, at the younger level too, you can recognizing um, the tensions in the classroom, like as maybe students disagree on some routines or really recognizing this is hard. It's hard to get along with people, and how can we solve this problem and learn to listen and respond, and what can we learn from these stories of people who did figure out how to work together, and so relating it to their personal lives, but also um, co-creating rubrics or criteria for projects and holding structured dialogues where students practice listening before responding, um, and like building. I think here, the next letter is R, and it's, well, spoiler, it stands for relevance and responsibility. It's the taking action part of it. But I do think the E needs to bring in we got to prepare for that action. So it's about not just learning about progress itself and the complexity of progress, but starting to plan for it and starting to think about what it is we care about within this topic that we're learning about. What are these things that are still what are the current entanglements and the current ways that we could empower ourselves, and how could we start planning student-led, inquiry-based action projects? But before we actually take the action, we have to plan it and recognize the complexity of that. I mean, it is hard, like, but you got this classroom full of kids that all care about different things. They might not agree on the best way to solve a problem or address an issue. And so there's, but typically if you just get out a chart paper and you start brainstorming ways, you start seeing different clusters of kids that really have similar ideas. So there's breaks, so they break up into groups and they want to do work on different projects. And it's about talking through the not as sexy stuff of leadership and coalition building and working together and organizing. It's not that exciting sometimes. It's sticky and it's icky and it's like involves spreadsheets and post-it notes, and it's not as yeah, it's like we want to just get to the change. We want to get to the cool part where they're, marching through the street, or where they're writing they're talking to the legislator on the phone, but there's a lot of work that has to get teased through before that. So that's what the I think about as um, the E is a lot of preparation for the students' own coalition building and action.
Hi, this is Leah popping in to share the free resource for this episode, the Power Framework and the Let's Act Framework. You can find it at the blog post for this episode, www.lindsaybethlyons.com/blog/268 or 269. Now back to the show.
There is so much organizing and coalition
Yeah.
building and like group work dynamics on like a meta level for civic projects as well. So I love this that they're learning
Uh-huh.
about it and they're preparing to do.
Yes, yes.
And
Big,
finally, do you want
big
to tell
for
us
it.
the R?
Yes, definitely. Okay, so the R stands for relevance and responsibility. It's where we make the curriculum matter. Um, Teachers are really good at relevance naturally, I think. Whenever teaching about social studies, they're pretty good at naturally saying, why does this matter? How does this connect to students today? Um, that's just something I've noticed that I don't really have to teach teachers to make curriculum relevant. They're really good at it. And in fact, I had one grade level, a third grade team, plan their entire curriculum so that the R, the relevance part of the R and the responsibility, the R was at the end of every unit, no matter what. Like, so unit one was like the P and the R. And then unit two was the O and then the R. And then unit three was the W and the R. And then the E, so the R was just like there no matter what, which I loved. Um, because yeah, we got to make everything relevant, and we don't want to just have this like culminating big, huge student action project at the end of the year. We want it multiple times throughout the year. So, so yeah, so relevance is about, and it's not just about connecting the past to the present or the past to the students' lives. It's also about connecting global systems to local lives realities, the whole think globally, act locally. So if you're, because a lot of kids care about something that's really big and really global. And so, getting them to look for organizations and partnerships and within their community that's already doing that work, that's part of the relevance connection too. Um, but the responsibility is, again, it's about creating space, making space for students to not just design, not just talk about the solving of the problem, but actually to take responsibility, to do actions and pursue responses to the issues that they're studying, um, and to position responsibility as informed, as ethical, collective action toward meaningful change. And that can be done in a lot of ways. We have um, a lot of, kids as young as kindergarten can, write letters to school leaders or to local officials. Kids can create posters, make, raise, like, have awareness campaigns about things that they care about. Um, Service projects, service learning is great as long as there is those deep discussions, as long as the P.O.W.E. came before. And they could do I mean, I've done like a water walk when we did like a world water crisis where we walk around the school with water, holding water, and or you can do, so that's like it's like a walk, but not like, teachers don't need to feel like they need to be bringing their students to like Black Lives Matter protests in order to be like having done action. Writing letters is huge. Writing letters to local or national leaders is huge. Teaching them writing scripts and then actually having them call not just community, not just legislators, but also like um, there was a group of students that I worked with who were they cared about like working against factory farms and wanting to build more sustainable um, organic farms so that treated animals better. And so they would call their whole action was calling a bunch of restaurant owners around the city and asking them where they get their meat. And that was like that was in and of itself, their action. Um so tons of ideas. I'm sure that's something that you talk about on this podcast often, but it's extremely important to make that space for it, and forefront also partnerships, I think with the community, and teaching students how to really reach out and look at the opportunities for solidarity, because that's, we don't want to all be working in isolation.
Oh my gosh, that was absolutely incredible. I want to be
You're so
mindful of
cute.
your time so we
No,
can
you're fine.
definitely wrap up quickly. But I love this framework. I love the examples. I love how practical it is. One of the things that's on my mind, and maybe this can be one of our kind of lightning round, 15 seconds or less answers, maybe
Sure.
like an audience member who just listened to this, right, or who engaged with the episode, they're going to feel like there's a lot here. What's one place they can take a small action to get started with this work?
I would say just taking a look at your own curriculum. So let's just think about, okay, close your eyes. What's your social studies curriculum? And then, um, or maybe just take one unit, one unit and think, okay, do I have the P? What's going on with the P? Do I have what identity stuff? Do I have any oppression stuff too early? I don't know. Okay, maybe. Yes. All right, let's move that back a little bit. Like let's think about the books. If there's anything that brings up oppression topics, let's move it back. And okay, now let's the O. Do I have are we talking about both oppression and opposition at the same time? Or are they separate? And do we have resistance stories? Probably, yes, but are they coming up at every instance of oppression that we talk about? And then, okay, quickly, wisdom and wit. Am I generating joy? Am I telling stories through the voices and eyes of marginalized groups and also through their wit and wisdom, their different ways of knowing and being and satire. Just and then the E is anything simplified, like overly simplified. How could I quickly like make sure that we're leaning into the complexity a little bit more? Um, and of course, am I providing a space for them to think about how it's relevant to them and how they might be able to take responsibility? And I think one thing that a pitfall that I see often at the end of these units are that the the teachers say, "Okay, now guys, we've learned a lot. Now it's time to take some action. What are some things that we could do to improve our community?" And even though the unit was all about maybe Black history, the kids start saying like, we could pick up trash, we could, save the turtles. And so I think making sure that the action is actually like it is okay to make that a requirement to say like no we are there we have explored a variety of problems and issues and it's like within the E it's important to talk about today not just this historical problem but today's issues and so um how can we address or those issues alleviate some problems in those so making sure that the action you take actually has something to do. So yeah, I guess thinking about it as a quick checklist. I don't know, that wasn't super short, but
But super
it,
helpful.
super what?
It's super helpful though. I
Oh,
love
okay, good. Yes, it doesn't have to be this long. I mean, I have rubrics for power that just have one or two questions per dimension. Um, and then, just think, okay, if I don't have enough wisdom and wit, like let's do a deep dive into joyous books. Like that's a fun little activity. Um, yeah, give me
I
an email or a call. I'd love to share books.
I was going to say that's our last question, so we'll segue there. Like, where can people connect with you?
Well, I can let's see. I have a website, schemacurriculum.com. I have an email address, Genevieve at schemacurriculum.com. I still have my personal website that has a lot of resources on it that people say they use still in their methods, elementary social studies methods courses. So I have not taken it down. Yeah, that's genevievecaffrey.com and it has a lot more of like my publications, my writings, a little bit more about my story. And then all of my writings are also on ResearchGate. I have just begun LinkedIn. I quit social media like 5 years ago, and I always said it was the best thing of my life. So I'm trying not to go too quickly back into it because I do want to get back out there because I just graduated. I'm ready to connect more, but right now I'm just on LinkedIn as Genevieve Erker Caffrey. Um, can I share one more thing about the power framework that I can't believe I did not talk about
Absolutely.
that I
Yes.
didn't say because it's like kind of the like obvious like it's like the elephant in the room, but it's the fact that the word power is purposeful. It's not just that these themes happen to spell P-O-W-E-R. It's that power, the circulation of power itself is through each dimension of power is important to explore within each dimension. So, and I think that each dimension interacts with power in a different way. So presence and personhood, doing work with students where you don't just jump into oppression and you really dig deep into the brilliance, agency, and humanity that conventional curriculum often suppresses, that is reclaiming power in and of itself. Like, you are reclaiming power by restoring that brilliance and agency of marginalized groups that are going to come in the curriculum and the students themselves. Oppression and opposition obviously surfaces the forces that have constrained communities while also illuminating the long histories of collective power that has shown up as resistance and disrupt those constraints. And then wisdom and wit shifts power by legitimizing the power of intellectual, creative, and cultural knowledge systems that have really sustained marginalized people across generations. And it's also like putting satire into songs. I mean, what an act of power and what a way to harness power. And then entanglements and empowerment demonstrates that power is never singular or self-made, but it emerges through relationships, obligations, tensions, all that make up solidarity work. And I think that obviously the word power is in the word empowerment. But I think we as a society would become more powerful if everyone were to recognize the complexity in every issue, and that no one is all this or all that, and no issue is all bad or all good. I mean, my own children know that they're just not allowed to ask, is he good? Is she bad? Like, is this good? Is this bad? Like, is nothing. They know I'll say, well, nothing is all good or all bad. And then relevance and responsibility, obviously, is redirecting power toward civic engagement, transforming our understanding and our learning into an accountable practice. So, yes, so I think it's just important that, I recognize the word power, that these are when you think of critical theory, what makes something critical is power dynamics. It's the study of power. It's the study of power dynamics. But it's the study of power dynamics now, in my mind, through each of these dimensions.
Oh my gosh, what a beautiful summary and extension of what we just talked about. Oh my goodness. Dr. Erker Caffrey, thank you so much for this conversation today.
Thank you, Lindsay. It's such a privilege, and I'm sorry if it's a little scattered. I just, finished a 350-page dissertation about all of this, so I could talk about it in a lot of directions, but thank you for keeping me focused and moving along.
If you like this episode, I bet you'll be just as jazzed as I am about my coaching program for increasing student-led discussions in your school. Shane Safir and Jamila Dugan talk about a pedagogy of student voice in their book, Street Data. They say students should be talking for 75% of class time. Do students in your school talk for 75% of each class period? I would love for you to walk into any classroom in your community and see this in action. If you're smiling to yourself as you listen right now, grab 20 minutes on my calendar to brainstorm how I can help you make this big dream a reality. I'll help you build a comprehensive plan, from full-day trainings and discussion protocols like Circle and Socratic Seminar to follow-up classroom visits where I can plan, witness, and debrief discussion-based lessons with your teachers. Sign up for a nerdy, no-strings-attached brainstorm call at lindsayBethLyons.com/contact. Until next time, leaders, think big, act brave, and be your best self.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. We'll see you on the next episode.